I was not expecting these little black pellets in my airbox, especially past the air filter. So immediately my mind started going into sabotage mode, and I thought maybe someone was putting in, like, it looks like abrasive tumbling media. It's not plastic, it feels like abrasive. This car is a rental on DriveShare, so immediately my mind went to someone is trying to destroy my engine by putting abrasive media into it. That was my first reaction. I was just doing some routine maintenance. I'm replacing the air filter, getting the car ready for an upcoming rally in Sequoia National Park. But I wasn't gonna make a video, but now that I found these, I need to figure out what this is and how it got there. I thought maybe a mouse had chewed through the filter and those were mouse droppings inside the airbox. But the original filter, it didn't have any holes in it. It was actually functioning. It was just, getting dirty. I thought maybe there was some rubbing in the airbox. Something might have been loose and it was chafing itself. I took some paper and I started drawing on the paper. It's like you can draw with it. So it's like an abrasive. I was burning it and it was burning and didn't have that thermoplastic smell. It didn't really have much smell at all. If we look at that hole in the back of the airbox right there, you can follow a cloth braided hose. It goes behind these oil tank vent hoses, crankcase breather hoses. It goes behind those, it goes up against the sound pad, and then it disappears into the fender. This is the air intake into the engine. So luckily, I don't think the pellets got inside the intake for the engine because the only place they could come in is from that hole, and they just kind of congregate here on the bottom. But I'm gonna take a peek with my borescope inside the airflow module. This is what measures the amount of air going into the engine. So I'm going to see if there are any pellets that got sucked in to the engine, or at least into the airflow module. So luckily I don't see any evidence of those little black pellets in the throttle body or in the airflow module, anything like that. I mean, they could have got gobbled up by the engine. I don't know. So if we follow those lines out into the wheel well, we can trace them up to basically the passenger side door. Up against the door, kind of up high, is a round cylinder. That hose from the airbox goes to the outside of the engine bay into that wheel well, which I guess is probably a like a charcoal canister or a EVAP kind of device of some kind. Maybe for smog, I'm not quite sure. There's a better look at that thing we want to get to right there. We do have a jack stand there underneath the transmission mount. Look what I got. Well, if you guessed charcoal, you got it right. This is the charcoal canister to capture, this is activated carbon, I think, or charcoal that can absorb odors. So a hot engine and the fuel system can emit vapors that are smelly. So this carbon will suck that up and treat it before it goes back into either the engine or the atmosphere. Looks like this tube right here is vented to the atmosphere. And then this tube is probably an inlet and outlet for the EVAP control. So I think we solved it. Pelican Parts has a whole thread about this problem. And apparently these, I think you can buy these new. I'm sure it's really expensive. I'm not even gonna check. I think there's a part number here on the end. It's called Purolator. It says Purolator on it. But people on Pelican have figured out that this material, this charcoal, is basically available for fish aquariums to clean up, you know, fish smells, whatever, aquariums. And then there is a piece of foam on probably this side that separates the pellets from the incoming and outgoing air. So it's like a little filter media. So if you get the right foam and the right activated carbon, you can just cut the end off and rebuild it. So that's what I'm gonna try, given this is just a daily driver and you're never gonna see this part. We'll have to re-epoxy this together, but that is a small price to pay compared to buying a brand new one. We really don't have anything to lose on this one, so let's cut it open. Okay, so the important thing I think to note in this is that, you know, there is a foam here that is hardly noticeable. There's a spring there. I accidentally cut into a little bit of the structure, but you know, it's not bad. Oh, there's a little bit of the foam left, and then there's another plate here. And the rest is just all pellets. It's a lot of pellets in there. So that's what's left in the bag. Who knows how much of that is missing, but I suspect this should be completely full of pellets. There's another plate inside. I'm trying to get that out. And between each plate is a layer of foam. And this is probably 5/16, maybe it was 3/8, but it's completely disintegrating. But it's important to know that the foam appears to be trapped like so. So it goes on these surfaces. The bumps go towards the foam. This one is interesting because it has a very fine screen on it. So this is, I think, the smaller tube. This is the one that connects to the engine, and this is the one that connects to the airbox. And since the foam is gone in there, that is why the pellets migrated into the airbox. There's a pretty good surface area left on the canister. So there's this part here appears to be the piece that holds this tube in place. So it only goes on one way. These ears aren't used, but the ears line up on either end. So this end and this end are clocked the same way. If this screen were broken up or damaged, I would say forget about it. But because this piece is in good condition, the foam is easy to replace. I think this is rebuildable. Super clean. This is a little bit of the original Cosmoline that was you know, sprayed on all the cars when they got transported or before they got transported by boat over to the United States. That stuff's on everything. It's a protectant, so you don't really need to remove it. It's ugly, but it's probably better than removing it. So the canister itself is pretty light, but the contents are heavy. The super clean is getting all the dirt, but it's not really taking off the cosmoline, and it's, you know, that stuff is there to stay. So I'm just going to take this outside, rinse it with water, and then we can start reassembling. Also made sure this was clear, so I was able to, you know, push water through this tube and this tube. There are no more pellets in there. And you can see the original cosmoline still there. It's here on the hose too, so I'm just not gonna remove that. You need a pretty strong chemical to remove the cosmoline, and it's just not worth it. Just a little bit of black residue left inside, which it's gonna get just the same carbon residue on there anyways when we put the new carbon pellets in, so. Yeah, that's it, pretty clean. This is the foam material that I actually had on hand. This was something that I considered making air filters out of for my yellow car Mac, but it's almost exactly the same as this. It's just slightly thicker, so it may compress down just a little bit more, but this has been installed for so many years that I think it's gonna be okay. This is, I think, 3/8 thick. I'm going to spray this with some rust remover. This is SEM rust mort. It's, I think, another form of phospho acid. Okay. One last rinse with the acid, and then it goes out to the garden hose one final time. So dry these plates and then paint them immediately. This is just Rust-Oleum metallic finish. It's silver. It looks a lot like this original, probably zinc. I think we're all set now. These plates have dried outside in the sun, and we have these foams that are cut, you know, pretty crudely, but they're just gonna get squished anyways. 3 of these plates are the same. These 3 are the same. This one is slightly larger and doesn't have the return or the little cup feature on it. So I think this one goes in last. That's kind of how I took it apart. So remember, the foam goes up against this part, like so. So we'll put this plate in first, pointing it straight down. So if you can see in there, that cup, the cup part of this actually keeps a little bit of a distance so that the air can disperse before it gets to these ports. So I think that's important. Here is the screen element. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in now. And that's just a friction fit over the tube here. There's a similar tube that goes on the inside, and it's just friction fit in there. So that's installed. Now you put the foam in. It's going to go over that tube. So it's gonna help kind of guide it in. And of course, that's gonna be hard to see because it's black. But then another plate follows up, and remember the bump on the plate goes towards the foam, creates a little bit of a seal. Let's get a long tool to push that down in a little further. A better tool to push the plate all the way down is this conduit tube. So it fits over the fine mesh, and if I put it here on the end of my table, I can make sure that is fully seated, which that feels a lot better. The other thing I've done is I can use this telescoping tool, and I can feel the foam is right up against the holes, and there's no airspace underneath there. So we have a nice stack between the plate, the foam, the second plate, and then this filter media, the fine mesh screen, is real tight on the assembly. It's time to put the new pellets in. And I've just opened up a corner of the bag. This is from Amazon. I'll put a link in the description below. But these pellets are larger, and typical with things you buy on Amazon, you don't always know what size they are. So this is much, much larger. The pellets are much bigger, which is less surface area. I don't think it's what they anticipated. I don't think that's what they wanted. But this is gonna fill up the space, and potentially, you know, it's gonna filter a little bit less efficiently, but I'm not going to really care about the size of the charcoal. I think what's in the bag is gonna work just fine. And try not to pour any inside the tube. So 3 pounds goes right up to about there, and that may not be enough. I think the way it's supposed to work is there's supposed to be enough charcoal so that you just compress the spring ever so slightly, so the charcoal has a firm set. I have no choice but to put some of the old charcoal back in there. Yeah, so now we have just a little bit of spring pressure, which I do like that. I like that there's no loose media in there. So if with this lined up correctly, a little spring pressure on there, when you shake it, there shouldn't be a whole lot of rattling around. I mean, the beads are gonna settle, but I think that's what we want. However, one thing I just discovered is there's a hole in the foam. So when I did that shaking, I'm now getting beads up over the foam. I don't think that's right because we don't want those beads to go down the vent. So I'm gonna cut a new piece of foam without the hole in the center. I think that was a mistake. One of the things I really like about working on these old things is that it does take a little bit of creative thought to understand the intent that Porsche was trying to do on this. So I just taught myself a little lesson about where the beads should be and like what that spring is supposed to do and why you don't want the beads to go through the center of the hole. I could be wrong on that, but at least it's thought-provoking. My thought is that every time you hit the brakes, you know, you don't want those pellets to be moving forward into that spring area. Spring area, I believe, is there just to, you know, pack the beads in there and give them a little bit of freedom to expand and contract. I suppose when they absorb, you know, vapors, they could expand. So the spring lets things, you know, expand and contract as needed. So this time I have another little foam donut. That's gonna pack in right here. So I'm going to stretch that over this vent tube because that's where those beads are leaking past the barrier. So this, I think, it's just going to keep those beads from getting out. Yeah, much better. Now there are no beads on the top. So I think we're good now to go ahead and glue this down. So I've roughed it up, obviously, with the saw blade. It's got a pretty good tooth to it. I put a little chamfer on this just for a little bit more bond area. But yeah, I'm going to use JB Weld on this. This quick clamp should do the trick to keep that top and the spring compressed while it glues and dries. So the end of this clamp is just between the two tubes, and it almost reaches the center here. So that's enough to compress the spring. We really want to, kind of work it into all those little nooks and crannies you created with the saw blade, because that tooth is what is good for the adhesion. So we'll make sure we spend a little time working this in. Now a lot of this is going to ooze out, which is going to make a mess for if anyone has to take this apart again. But my guess is next time around this is going to get replaced. So don't buy a used one thinking you're good to go. I think the foam needs to be replaced, especially with today's fuels. Align this plastic feature to the tube and push it down. So put the clamp right back where it was. Watching that tube, make sure it's synchronized, lined up. Squeeze it down. Yep. It looks like it just is shifted this way just a little bit. So I have another one of these clamps that I'm gonna try to center it up like so. So that moved it just a slight bit. And I am pretty happy with that in terms of coincentricity. Just a little offset right here. This thing is not perfectly round. So that's just how it's going to be. Put a little fillet on that corner. And now we wait for whatever it says on JB Weld. I think it's 24 to 48 hours. In the meantime, that gives me time to order probably new EVAP hoses. If you guys are curious about the hose size, I'm gonna measure it real quick. The larger one is 13 millimeters. So 11 in the center and 13 on the outer. So it looks like this outer tube is 11. If you want to replace that, I don't think that's very critical. But I'm gonna replace the two that run inside the engine bay because that sees a lot of heat. I like to get that tubing, especially the German braided stuff, from Bellmetric. I think they'll have the 11 and 13. I'll double check that. So it turns out no one was trying to sabotage my car. It's kind of a funny story. Basically it sabotaged itself. I had not heard about this one, so I was a little surprised, caught me off guard. But let me know if you guys have ever seen this happen in your car or if it's only related to Carreras. I don't know if the SCs do that too. I know the SCs have an airbox, but I don't know how it vents and so forth. So anything like that, let me know, or what else you found in your airbox. I mean, I guess mouse droppings are possible if the car sits long enough, but yeah, let me know. Cheers. Take care, guys.